This is the Born to Be podcast, where we believe you were created on purpose and for a purpose. Each week, we deliver inspiration and interviews with today's top thought leaders who are living out their unique calling every single day. Are you ready to discover your true identity and become who you were born to be? The future is yet to be created. And now, here's your host, Darren Earlywine.
Another episode of the Born to Be podcast. I'm your host, Darren Earlywine. So stoked you're joining us again. Whatever you're doing, if you're mowing the lawn, you got to look out in front of you so the line stays straight. That's when I listen to podcasts when I'm mowing the lawn. Maybe you're on the treadmill. Listen, stay looking straight forward. I don't want you falling down, and this being the podcast where you break your leg or something. So stay focused. Stay with us. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Born to Be podcast. Today, we have Scott Swan in studio with us. Now, if you live in Indy, you know Scott. He's been on WTHR forever. He's the Silver Fox. He has, some of the best. WTHR, you guys, is that part of the interview process? So, like, if you don't have stellar hair,
you're not getting an interview. You're not getting a job. That's right.
Is there anybody bald that's even on staff?
Chuck Lofton.
Okay, Chuck. Was Chuck bald?
Chuck's got a great head, though. A great.
It's shaped
bald head. Oh, yeah.
Some people aren't made for bald heads.
Yeah, Chuck is.
But, Scott, I've watched you on the news forever. We went to church together for a while when I was at East 91st Street. And I'm excited to share your story on the Born to Be podcast because I just want to know the whole process to get you into the career you're in, how God, guided and directed that. And then we'll work up to a couple years ago. It was a touch or go there for a minute. You thought maybe it was the end of the road. You were about to meet Jesus. Am I right?
That's right.
And that's obviously a life-defining moment. I'm just we'll pick up there in a little bit of just kind of how God has guided and shaped that and how that's refocused your life. But thanks for being on the podcast.
It's great to be here, Darren.
So we here at the Born to Be podcast, we absolutely 100% believe that God's created you on purpose and for a purpose, that he's near you, not far from you, and that he is actually for you, not against you. And Scott, I know your life story is going to prove that to be true. And so I'm guessing if we found some little Scotty Swan home videos where you like doing the news, like from home or like standing in front of the TV, doing the weather for your parents, or where did the whole process to get in broadcast journalism start for you?
Well, the image that I think of in my childhood, where I think of myself as a future TV person, is being a sportscaster.
Yeah.
It's in the backyard with a baseball bat and a baseball, hitting home runs into the backyard and announcing those as if I was Vin Scully, who was my childhood idol. He's the voice of the L.A. Dodgers.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to be a sports guy my entire life. I got interested in news because my parents would always sit down and watch the local and national news every night, and I was interested in news, but my dream was to become a sports guy.
So as a kid, you literally were doing play-by-play in the backyard?
The neighbors would probably hear me calling home runs. I was a great athlete in my mind when I was in the backyard. Now, the reality of it was that I was very average, probably below average in baseball, but boy, I was Hank Aaron back in the mid-'70s.
Yeah, in the backyard.
That's right.
So, where did that, did you... I guess one thing I think is interesting is for so many people, there was a moment that marked them that either they realized I could actually be good at this, or someone spoke truth into their life and said, you're really good at that. Can you go back to think of one of those moments where you thought, you know what, there might be something here?
Mom called me motor mouth.
Really?
Growing up, yeah. I talked too much in class, got in way too much trouble for being that class clown.
Yeah.
But I think when I got to high school, there was a TV production class in my high school that allowed me to be a sports guy. And we would do a little sportscast, and that was played in the school. And my friends thought it was hysterical. They thought I did a really good job. And so that's probably as a 15-year-old, I really realized this is something I could see myself doing as a career.
See, I think it's funny you say that you talk too much. I always say that every year at school, my report cards would come through and it would be, can't stay on task, talk too much.
That's me.
Yeah, every single time. And I actually talk about that often in our Spiritual DNA Live workshop, because I let people know that so often if we, like both of us, our weakness is we can't stop talking and we can't stay on task. That's a weakness.
Yep.
Well, if you focus your life around trying to shore up your weaknesses, you're going to never, walk into living into your strengths. And so I tell people now, like, what has created my whole life is that I can't stay on task and I talk too much.
Yeah.
But I remember looking down on myself at that point and thinking, man, because my brother is a super introvert, doesn't talk. Like, you could hang out with my brother for 3 days, he'd never say a word to you. He was studious. I mean, honor student, summa cum laude, whatever it is. He had all the tassels when he graduated from high school and college. Like, they were just like, you know what, you could not attend here anymore. That's how my honors from high school. But I always thought like I had to be like him to be successful. And it took me a while to own, like, wait a second, there may be something here with the fact that God's made my brain to not operate like that, and the fact that I have too many words that I got to say every day. So was there ever a point for you where you were like, can I own this, or do I have to be like, was it a sibling or somebody? Did you ever think I've got to be more like them?
Well, Mom and Dad were both introverts. Dad was very smart. I was not that smart. I mean, I got small straights on my report card. I'd get an A, B, C, and a D. I was not, I was a B student.
Yeah.
But I really I just wanted to be a storyteller. That's what I really wanted to be. Whether it was being in the backyard and being Vin Scully on the radio and announcing a Dodger game, or being a reporter and telling a story. Storyteller is something that's how I define myself now. Even now as a Christian, we all have a story. We all have a story to share, and I just love telling the story of how God has worked in my life.
Yeah. So what are the roots there, Scott? I mean, did you grow up a Christian family, going to church your whole life?
Grew up in Southern California, Christian family. My parents didn't become Christians until they were in their 40s.
Really?
I went to a Christian camp, came back after hearing what Jesus had done in my life, and as a 12-year-old boy, accepted Christ in the back of a church van after a beach retreat. But it wasn't until I was 19 where I really discovered how God would be there for me in the midst of a big trial as I was starting to go through 10 years of panic attacks.
Really? So take us there. So how old were how old were you when your parents came to faith?
I was 12, so my parents were in their early 40s. So we came to a relationship with Christ about the same time.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they came. They were young parents who always went to church.
Yeah.
But didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus.
Okay.
So being in the choir, attending church, sort of the check-the-box Christian, that's how Mom and Dad would describe it, but really didn't understand the personal nature of a relationship with Christ until Mom started getting in a women's Bible study and learning how much more there was to experience her own faith.
So then during that season, that was a drastic shift of like the culture of your family, then, I would say, right?
Totally. Yeah, because then it became, Scott, this is a relationship. This isn't religion. We're not just going to church on Sunday because this is what you do as a Christian. There's so much more. Let me tell you about a personal relationship with Christ. That's really what it became for me.
So then through those years, was it something at that point where you start sensing maybe it's not just that I want to be Vin Scully, maybe it's not just that I want to tell stories, but did you sense maybe this is was it a sense of calling for you? Like, this is God's call, or where did that kind of understanding of God's purpose in your life function at that point?
I think I was a typical teenager and wasn't thinking that deeply
Sure.
about it at that point. I mean, I figured that because I could talk and because I was a pretty good writer and a pretty good storyteller, I thought that would be a career. But God was showing up on Sundays, not the rest of the week. He wasn't involved in my life to the degree he is now.
Sure.
So I think I had God in a box. I had God in that Sunday morning box, and I brought him out on Sundays, and then went back to focusing my life around me the rest of the week.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times I don't know if I'm not going to blame it on God. I'm going to say that a lot of times pain in our life is the thing that actually gets our attention to what's going on. So take us to the point you start having these panic attacks. What's going on there?
Yeah, I really remember the first one driving home. I was in the car, had to get off the road. I felt this sense of panic. I was having these sweaty palms, this racing heartbeat, and upset stomach. Once I got off the side of the road, the symptoms went away. I showed up at the theater that evening. Mom and Dad had these seats right down in front. I couldn't sit down in front in the middle of the auditorium. I had to get up, find an exit, and stand near the exit that whole night. And this is when my wife and I were just starting to date. We'd go into a restaurant. I'd need to get a table near the exit. If I went to a sporting event, I'd have to stand near the exit. I couldn't go through normal experiences without having these symptoms flare up. Well, I can tell you that these are bad signs for somebody who wants to be on TV because, this just in, panic attacks aren't good for people who want to be on TV, right?
Yeah.
Can't build a set next to a TV exit. So at that point, I started praying because I figured, okay, God who created me can heal me. So I kept praying, God, would you take these panic attacks away? And I was getting silence from heaven, and I became frustrated with God because I was not getting the healing that I was expecting. I wanted that healing, and I was going through months and now years of struggling with panic attacks. These panic attacks would follow me in my early sports career in Palm Springs and in Hawaii, to the point where after about 10 years, I ended up having to quit TV news because the panic attacks were too much.
Get out of here. So, you were in Palm Springs and Hawaii.
Yeah.
Talking about sports. If there was two beautiful places, you think that the weather would help it.
I know. Yeah, who quits a job in Hawaii? So they had to be bad, right?
So, I'm guessing you tried medication, just everything was just nothing was working.
Tried counseling, medication, kept going back to prayer, and again, just kept feeling this silence. Now, as a believer in my 50s, I can understand how God carries you through a valley, but I can tell you at that point, I felt like God had abandoned me.
Sure.
I was frustrated.
Yeah.
There's a psalm that talks about, God, how long will you keep your face from me? That's how I felt for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't imagine a day where I could go into a room, sit where I wanted, and not have a panic attack. I couldn't imagine a day where I could be on TV not experiencing a panic attack. I couldn't imagine that. Wow. And like I said, I felt angry and frustrated that God was leaving me alone. Now, fast forward I'm into my 50s now. I haven't had a panic attack in 23 years. God had his timing.
Yeah.
His timing's always perfect. His timing's never wrong. And that's my testimony for people, to hang on to God through those valleys, that God never leaves you in that dark place. I know that now. I didn't know that then.
Scott, one thing is that I can imagine you've gone after this as a career. You've moved around, literally the world to pursue this dream. And in the day that you are stepping away from the sports desk, the day you're resigning, the day you're walking away, one of the things that I feel like everybody experiences at least once, sometimes some people experience it more than once in their life, is what I call a death of a dream. They have a dream. It fills their life with meaning. It fills every day with purpose. A lot of times it becomes their identity, and then something happens and the dream dies. And here you are, Friday, you've got this dream and things are happening. All of a sudden Monday, you've got the, kind of a lifeless corpse of what was.
That's right.
So if you can you go back to that of dealing with, okay, the dream that I had that I understood to this point, it no longer exists. What happens there?
I can tell you, I remember that to this day. It was 1990. Janae and I were in our apartment in Hawaii. I came back, I'd had a really bad panic attack. Now, viewers wouldn't know it. They couldn't watch and say, what's wrong with Scott? Is he having some sort of an issue on TV? They wouldn't see it. It was an internal thing. But I came home and cried with Janae because I realized I couldn't do this anymore.
Wow.
So I walked into the news director's office the next day and resigned, and we moved back to California, and I gave the dream up. And it was exactly as you say, Darren. It was a death of a dream. I couldn't imagine having left Hawaii and left that TV news business. I couldn't imagine a day where I would get back into it. I just couldn't. I couldn't imagine going through a day without experiencing this panic attack. Couldn't imagine it. God knew that the dream was still alive. He was just going to take me through a season where I was going to be waiting for another door to open.
So take us there, because one of the things that right now as we're recording this, Easter's just off the horizon here, and And there's those moments, you know what I mean, as we look at Holy Week and an idea that, you know, Friday Jesus died, and everybody was like, okay, this is obviously bad. You know what I mean? Understated. But Saturday had to be a pretty depressing, dark day for everybody that knew Christ, right? Because they didn't know how the story ended. They just knew he just died. We have zero application of what is happening right now. So what did that Saturday season look like for you guys as you guys came back to California?
Well, again, I think there was a combination of frustration that I had to give up, anger that I held God responsible for it, and yet there was some happiness and joy because my wife and I started having kids. And so those three kids and my marriage helped get me through that Saturday, if you will, that 5 years where I was without TV. And I had a job that was somewhat satisfying. I enjoyed, my time out of the TV news business. But
what did you do?
I worked for Disneyland. I worked as
the happiest place on earth.
The happiest place on earth. Look, the free tickets were great. The people there were great. And my kids, obviously, they grew up with Disney. So it was a fun job, and I was able to use my TV talents to produce TV stories for the theme park for 5 years. But this panic attacks during this Saturday, if you will, started to subside. I could go into church. I could sit now, maybe not at the very back, maybe the second to last row. I could walk into a restaurant and sit where I wanted. I could go to a basketball game and not have a panic attack. So I started dreaming again on this Saturday, if you will, and think, God, would you allow me to get back into TV news? Because that was really my heart's desire. That was really where I felt called.
So was it seems like was it just kind of gradual? There wasn't like a catalytic moment. It's done. It's just you just started to gradually sense a sense of healing, sense of calm, being able to I mean, were you figuring out some different like tactics or things to think through, or is it just kind of progressively started to fade?
It was just a gradual fade. Just over that 5-year period, just the ability. And again, I'm not doing on-air stuff. I'm still doing some interviews and some of the other things, but in the private parts of my life, walking into a restaurant or going to a game or a movie theater, I don't remember having those sense of, the sweaty palms, the upset, stomach, the racing heartbeat. I don't remember having those. And so I think I was building confidence. I think God was preparing me to re-enter.
One thing you said that I want to pull back to, you said that you began to dream again, which I think is huge. And I don't want you to miss this as you're listening, because I think that's such a key element that so many people miss is they have a death of a dream. They have that Saturday moment. And what happens is the grief of it, the confusion of it, whatever, they just stop dreaming. And I'm excited to hear the next part of the story, because one thing I know is I've had a couple dreams die. In fact, I'm at a point right now where there's some new dreams stirring. And what I find is that one of the things that dreaming requires is courage, because it usually requires another risk. And a lot of people shrink back from that edge of the dream or of the trusting of God, because there's that level of fear and faith. We talk about it all the time on the Born to Be podcast and its Spiritual DNA, and even on Radio Theology, that we believe that fear is your enemy, right? But when you begin to understand your worth and who God's created you to be, you will begin changing your world. And so take us back to that moment where you started to step into the faith of dreaming again.
Well, I had everything else in my life in Southern California. I had this great marriage, these 3 young kids. I was close to our families, living a couple of miles from the beach. I mean, I had a really nice life.
This is sounding pretty nice.
It's pretty nice, but I wasn't doing what I wanted to do in terms of a career.
Yeah.
And so my prayer life became, God, would you open the door for me to re-enter TV news? Now, at this point, I had sort of decided that I wanted to step away from being a sportscaster and do news instead. And so I began sending out tapes and began getting really excited about the possibility of landing a job. Now, I wanted to stay in Southern California. I thought maybe I'm good enough to be in a San Diego market or maybe a Phoenix or something like that. No one called. No one offered a job except for one place, Indianapolis.
Cornfields, no!
I had never been to Indiana. Janae and I came and visited her sister who had moved out here, had met a guy from Lawrence Central. And we found what a great place Indianapolis was. And I ended up getting a job offer here at a local station and took that leap and took the job and moved my family out of the comforts of Southern California to Indianapolis. And can remember that first night wondering, are these panic attacks going to resurface? Got through the newscast, no panic attack. God healed me. Took a long time for that healing to finally come, but at that point I finally realized that dream had come back.
You think of a moment, Scott, where, because I mean the consistency here of the story is even when you felt betrayed or distant. You know, we talk about it every week on Radio Theology that God is near you. He's not far away, even when you can't see it. Was it? Can you think of a moment or maybe a season or something as you got here to Indy and you realized God has healed me of just kind of a moment where you knew He's here, He's with me, and that confidence went to another level?
Well, that first newscast, I mean, as soon as that first newscast ended, I felt like, wow, I was able to finally conquer that fear, that anxiety that had been with me. If you've dealt with fear and anxiety in your life, you know what I've been through. So to finally get to the point where I could conquer that fear, I knew that God had finally healed me. You know, He says in Psalms that, "Oh Lord, I called on you for help, and you took away my fears." And I finally felt that confidence that God had not abandoned me. That was my misconception of what God does. God holds your hand through that fear and anxiety that you go through. And to wait that long for healing, man, that was a great moment.
I know you can hear the emotion in Scott's voice, and I want to speak to you. If you're at a place right now and that's you, and maybe today you felt like, I can't get through another day. I can't wait another day for healing. I just want you to be encouraged by what Scott just shared, is that God has not given up on you. God has not abandoned you. God is shaping. He is molding you. He has promised us that He'll never leave us and never forsake us. He sticks closer than a brother. And hold on today. Your healing is coming. I'm not saying it's coming today. I'm not saying that it's coming tomorrow. But I know that He has promised and He's faithful. And Scott, just, man, that's beautiful. Beautiful to see the process that He's taking you through. And man, what's crazy is you get on the back side of that, and you're released from, the fear of this, the panic attacks. I'm sure there's lots of stories in between here and there, but great career here in Indy, great influence all across the city. Then 2 years ago, we're looking at not the death of a dream, we're looking at the potential death of life. So let's fast forward and get there.
Yeah, so 2017, I just wrapped up a newscast. I'd been dealing with a stomach ache that was getting progressively worse. Nearly passed out in the restroom at Channel 13. My wife, who was out of the country on a business trip, sent me a text, "Go see a doctor," all in caps. So I did. I drove myself to the hospital, checked myself into the ER. They ran some tests, discovered that I was bleeding internally, that a medium-sized artery that was down near my stomach had burst. I was losing half my blood. I needed 4 units of blood that night. I was in critical condition. My blood pressure dropped to 50/30. I was in really, really bad shape.
And this came out of nowhere. This wasn't like I'd been having a stomach ache. This is I'm sitting here and what is happening?
Yeah, this had been a stomach ache that had gotten progressively worse over the course of a week, and I didn't realize obviously the seriousness of it until I got to the ER. I couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak. I could hear the paramedics and the EMTs working on me. It was hailing, so they couldn't put me in a medical helicopter. They needed to get me to a larger hospital where they had specialists for this kind of thing. And so they loaded me in the back of an ambulance, took me from one hospital to another. And I've since learned that some of the medical personnel weren't sure I was going to survive that 10-minute ambulance ride.
Wow.
I was back in the ambulance. I could hear them discussing my vitals, discussing the streets that I was passing. In fact, I went right by your studio two years ago. And all I could think about and all I could remember that night was feeling this peace that God promises us. There's a verse in Romans where it talks about in our weakness, the Spirit Himself will intercede with words and groans that words cannot express. I felt that in the back of that ambulance. And by the time I got to the larger emergency room at the hospital, the doctor opened me up and determined that I had not wasn't bleeding anymore. The bleeding had stopped. There's no good medical explanation for the bleeding stopping. I mean, when you lose 50% of your blood in one incident, that's pretty serious. And but as a Christ follower, I know that God healed me in the back of that ambulance. There's just no doubt about it. I spent 12 days in the hospital. They determined that I had some rare autoimmune disease called vasculitis pan that about 80 people suffer from across the country.
80?
80. And, they took me to the Cleveland Clinic. My wife asked one of the doctors there, "Are you a ticking time bomb?" And the doctor said if he takes this medicine, he'll unlikely have a recurrence. Took the medicine, a year went by, felt much better, went back, they did new scans, no evidence of disease. So God healed me again, taking away this rare disease. I've not had any issues since, and God's restored me completely in terms of my health. So when you go through an experience like, surviving a near-death experience like I did 2 years ago, surviving and getting through 10 years of panic attacks, you know that a God exists. You know that a God is still in the business of performing miracles. I'm a walking miracle. Yeah. There's just no doubt about it. And it's given me great confidence and boldness to share what God's done in my life. Yeah. And, that's what I'm doing.
Well, I love to see that now. Obviously living here in Indy and being your friend and, obviously know what's going on in the local media and following you on social. It's like what's been cool to see is to see how God's healed you through that. But like you said, it's given you a passion and a fire to share the story. You're all over the place, all over the state, sharing in churches and other places the story. And what's that done for you? Because you could have said, and I'm not saying there necessarily would have been if you've been healed by something and you're not out speaking, that may not be your jam, your calling. I mean, Scott can't stay on task. He talks too much. So he's got to go out and, he's got to go out and tell his own story. But
right.
What's that meant for you and kind of on the backside of that, saying, you know what, God, you have done this, and now, I'm going to go and sing your praises and tell this story again and again.
I think when I was younger, I looked at TV as being, that's my calling in life. TV news is my profession, but sharing my faith, that's my purpose. Wow. Going through 10 years of panic attacks, surviving this internal bleeding incident, God has equipped me, I think, to talk about his faithfulness, his goodness, his love, his healing, this idea that no matter what you're going through, to hang on to God, that he never leaves you in that dark place, that God is still in the business of healing. Look, everyone is dealing with something, whether it's fear or anxiety or a health crisis. I'm just telling you, God is your resting place. You've said it before, God never leaves you. He never forsakes you. He walks you through that dark spot. I'm just telling my story and kind of going back to what I said earlier. I'm a storyteller, but we're all storytellers. I try to tell groups when I'm giving my testimony, be a storyteller of what God has done in your life. You have a different audience than me. You may have your family and your friends at work. Tell them what God is doing in your life. Even tell them how you're waiting on God to get you through what you're going through. Because when you share your story of what God's doing in your life, people don't see you. They see God at work in you. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sharing my story, and I'm encouraging other people to be a storyteller. Don't bury the lead. Don't keep the most important part of your story in the middle or at the end. Tell people what God's doing in your life.
Wow. That's it. Mic drop moment. Done. You guys can't see it. Lisa Graff from Radio Theology. She's in the studio. She's in tears, crying the whole time. And just beautiful stuff, Scott. I just, man, I can't even, I'm not going to add anything to it. That was so well said. We're just going to skip right to the lightning round. So here's a lightning round to wrap it up. I got to know a book, a band, and a movie that has greatly impacted your life?
Well, the book I can tell you that influenced my life the most, and I'm going to forget the author at least initially, but the idea about this was Too Busy Not to Pray is the title of the book, and it allows you to experience a prayer life that gives you a start, a middle, and an end. It has guided my prayer life. It's this Acts plus L model, starting with adoration of God, who God is, and proclaiming all the wonderful adjectives about him, confessing to him the things in my life that I'm making mistakes. I am a sinner and I need his help. Thanksgiving, thanking God for all the good and perfect things that he provides. The supplication is the shopping list, if you will. And then the L in the X plus L model is listening for God's word. That book has profoundly changed how I pray. I have a much deeper, much more rich prayer life as a result of this book. Again, it's Too Busy Not to Pray.
Too busy not to pray.
Too Busy Not to Pray.
I like it. What about a band?
Coldplay. I've seen them twice.
Yeah.
They are the best band I've ever seen.
I've not seen them live. They're on my bucket list.
They are amazing. Saw them at Bankers Life Fieldhouse here in Indy. Saw them in Dallas once. I mean, they're just phenomenal.
Awesome.
And I will say, my wife and I have got tickets to go see Hillsong United in Chicago this summer, and Hillsong is one of my favorite bands. Can hardly wait to see them because it's such a great night of worship.
No doubt. What about a movie?
I love Field of Dreams.
Yeah.
Just because I love that relationship that Kevin Costner had with his dad.
Yeah.
And the surprise ending that's there. And the fact that maybe it's in Iowa, and the fact that I live in Indiana, the idea of cornfields and baseball, something about that just appeals.
I love it. Scott Swan, oh my gosh, legend in his own time. I'm so stoked. This is such a good episode. Scott, if somebody maybe when they want to book you to come speak at their church or something going around, or they just want to maybe connect, maybe somebody's listening right now and they're like, man, I'm like, this fear thing is happening. Maybe they want to reach out and email you. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's scott.swan@WTHR.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. You can reach out that way as well. I'd love to talk to him. And
he's on the news every day.
I'm there too.
The silver fox. Scott, when I see your hair, I kind of get excited because I'm like, I'm starting to get some sprigs of silver.
Darren, I'm looking at you now. I'm not seeing any gray.
No, there's some in there.
You've got amazing hair.
Well, thank you, but I can't wait till it's just silky white.
Look, it'll come. Father Time always wins, right?
Oh, my gosh. Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Born to Be podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Born to Be podcast. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a question for Pastor Darren, a suggestion for a future guest, or if the podcast has made an impact in your life, get in touch with us at blackbirdmission.com. And if no one else tells you today, you were made on purpose and for a purpose. God is near to you, not far from you, and God is for you, not against you. Have a great week.